Hey guys, Rollout here, and welcome back to Builder's Block. Last week I mentioned that I wanted to take a break from Zoids and clear my creative palette a little. I tried to build a couple transformers, I played around with some weird techniques, and I pursued a few random, spontaneous ideas. So we're back to a pretty typical format with this one. Consider checking out the Builder's Block Patreon page, where there's a Discord server, I post daily updates, and I offer the opportunity to purchase my LEGO creations. You can also support the show by liking and sharing this video. With that aside, let's get started. I started off the week by conceptualizing a transformer that turns into some kind of crustacean, either a lobster or a crab. And the idea is that it's kind of a reverse duocon that splits into two robots, each formed from a single claw and 4 of the limbs. But I found this scale very limiting. I don't think I have quite enough room to execute this concept well. I struggled with getting the limbs to split far enough apart in a way that still made room for the claws to become the chests of the robot. I thought about maybe making the limbs solely into the arms of the robot so that it had claws in robot mode as well, and then the legs would form from the body of the crab or lobster. But I also ran into problems with this idea as well, because really the root of my issues with this design is that I can't really think of a good armature that attaches the claws at this scale so that they can fold into the chests of these robots. So I don't know if this concept is going to work, but maybe I just need to think about it for a little while longer and come up with an epiphany. On the next day, I was playing around with a relatively new part. This is from the Monkey Kid sets. It's kind of a modified lightsaber handle. It's slightly longer, it has less detail, the ratios are different, but it seems extremely useful. I imagine that I am destined to use this in a transformer someday, but on this day, I was just experimenting with the piece. So I built this very simple fence using some robot arms here. It folds in half, and that's about it, but it gives you an idea of the potential of these elements. I also played around with this piece in relation to brackets. This kind of folds in half, but it doesn't do much else. It's a helpful representation of, again, the ratios of this part, I think. And then I built a shopping cart that transforms into a leg. This definitely gives me Matchbox vibes, if you remember that old Transformer, where just a bunch of individual things kind of combine into a single robot. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with this concept here, but this was just sort of an idea of like how I would integrate this piece into a transformer realistically. Although, I just had an idea, and I think this is the first time that I've just had a burst of inspiration while I'm recording the episode. But obviously the idea was that like multiple things would culminate into a single robot with this design. But I had not considered building a robot where the centerpiece is one of those, I don't know what you call them, like shopping cart pushers. They're like a motorized vehicle that connects to either the back or the front of a convoy of shopping carts so that they can push the shopping carts from the parking lot back into a grocery store. And so basically that would form the middle of the robot, and then like 4 shopping carts would form the limbs of the robot. That's an interesting idea. That's like a very interesting alt mode that I'm kind of interested in. So I might want to play around with that idea. On the next day, I wanted to use this strange old element for something. Now, on paper, it seems very obvious to me how you could use a piece like this in a transformer. I think that top bar could be used to flip out some kind of head. The bottom bar would be used for some kind of hatch that opens up to reveal that head. You could attach legs on the ball joint, and then the bars on the side could be used to attach arms. Like, it seems very clear to me that this could be used for that purpose. When you look at it on Bricklink, at least, it turns out that these bar elements are slightly thinner than a normal lightsaber rod, and clips have no clutch when they attach to this. So the whole thing flops around, and none of what I mentioned works at all, which is really, really unfortunate, because I think that if this was just the size of a normal bar, I could very likely make a transformer out of it. As it stands, I had to do something a little bit different. So I built this kind of construction mech or drone with big arms and hook hands. I think it's a very interesting design. It uses that element internally, and I had to pretty much attach every single clip I could to that piece in order to secure it so that it didn't rattle around, because all of those connections are so loose. You can see that it uses the toe ball element that is used for steering mechanisms as well for the limbs. And I found kind of a very interesting combination of parts using that element, where you can take one of the toe ball dart pieces and secure it to a maxifig hand using that element. It's kind of an interesting design choice, and that ball joint, one of those toe balls on that dart piece, is really the only thing that can fit into that space on the element. So that is kind of interesting. This thing isn't quite as articulate as you might imagine with ball joints everywhere. That much is pretty limited, but again, it's still a pretty cool design. On the next day, I found an old slope element from a promotional McDonald's set, and I really wanted to use it for something, so I decided to recreate that original set with a modern style. I'm sure a lot of people will be very nostalgic for this, but here is the McDonald's Chicken Nugget Racer. If you want to look up the original set, I think it's set number 1995-1. I believe it was just called Racer. And I think it was supposed to evoke more of like an F1 racer. In my interpretation, I turned it into a much different car, more like a buggy or an RC car. But I think it's a neat design, and I think the inspiration is clear despite it having a very different silhouette. It still has like the big wheels and the big spoiler on the back. Here it is from the rear. You can see it's quite detailed. I think it's a pretty cool looking vehicle. It does not roll, because apparently that's a significant character flaw of mine. Does not make things roll. But here is a better look at the piece in question with the doofy chicken nugget man on it. I love this piece. There's something very charming about it. You can see why I wanted to use it. I decided to obscure it a little bit by a windshield so that, you know, just at a glance, you see a pretty cool looking car. And then, you know, when you pay attention to it a little more closely, you see the chicken behind it. I think like not immediately recognizing the reference makes the joke land a little bit better. You can also see I used a pretty interesting technique with the canisters on the side. If you use a 1x1 cylinder and a 1x1 round tile, you can fit that inside of this bar element here, which is a pretty cool detail. On the last day, I built this very suspicious looking butler automaton. I'm definitely getting HAL 9000 vibes from this guy, but he's basically just a showcase of some really, really weird techniques. I looped a rubber band through this old winch element, and then attached a tube, like the rubber band like fits in the indent on that tube, securing the whole thing. I don't know what else this could be used for. I also fit a unicorn horn inside this combination of pieces here for the single beady red eye. I also fit the ball tip of a lever element into the bottom of this Technic piece. Aside from the strange techniques, there's nothing super special here, although he is strangely similar to the old Synchro Frame Beta. He's got like the same swept back alien head and like tube limbs and like scarecrow frame, but that's just a weird coincidence. Having released the showcase and instructions for Blade Hopper, we're back to this period where I'm just sort of searching for my next Transformer design. No luck this week, but we'll keep trying. In the meantime, I think these failed concepts provide you with a good sense of my design process, and hopefully some valuable inspiration. Special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, especially my leader class patrons, Valravn, Beyond the Brick, and Beta. Until next time, this has been Rollout, signing off.